The rock hit Sera Voss in the back of the head. Not hard. More like a statement. She spun around, hand flying to her neck, and found herself staring at nothing, just the usual gray blur of Halvern's morning market, traders shouting over each other, coal smoke sitting low in the cold air like it owned the place. Then she looked down. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, arms folded, head tilted at the specific angle that meant she had been standing there long enough to form an opinion, and the opinion was not flattering. "You threw that at me," Sera said. "I tapped you," the girl said. "I needed you to stop walking." With a rock. It was a small rock. She said it like the size settled the matter. Then she stepped closer and stared up at Sera with dark, steady eyes that did not blink nearly as often as they should have. "You look like me," she announced. "But older. And dirtier." Sera opened her mouth. Closed it. "You're Freckles." The girl reached up without asking and touched the bridge of Sera's nose with one finger. 1, 2, 3, and one near your eye. She stepped back and crossed her arms again. "I have those. Exactly those. Same side. Same places." Something moved inside Sera's chest. Something old and locked. She had spent 8 years making sure things like that did not move. She pressed it back down. "Who are you?" she said. "Pip," the girl said, like it was obvious. "Who are you?" Before Sera could answer, the crowd parted. Not gradually, all at once, the way crowds move when someone powerful walks through and everyone has silently agreed not to be in the way. The man who stepped through was tall, dark-haired, and carrying the kind of stillness that did not come from calm. It came from control, the long practice of a man who could not afford to look like anything was wrong even when everything was. He swept the market in one look, found Pip, and something in his jaw unclenched. Then his eyes moved to Sera. And stayed. "Pip." His voice was low. Careful. The voice of a man choosing words the way someone else might choose which wire to cut. "Father." Pip pointed at Sera without turning around. "Look at her freckles." He looked. Sera watched him look. She watched the color shift in his face, not pale exactly, but something that had no good name. "What is your name?" he said. "Sera Voss." "Where are you from?" "Nowhere that concerns you." Pip made a small sound of approval. The man, the king, Sera would learn later, and the title came with a whole citadel and a lot of guards and a name, Selim, did not blink. "You're coming with us," he said. Not a question. "I'm not," Sera said. "Yes," Pip said, seizing Sera's hand with both of hers. "You are. I need to show you my collection." That was how it started. Not with a summons. Not with a threat. With a 6-year-old who threw a rock and refused to let go. The citadel was colder than Sera expected and warmer than it looked. Pip led her through it like a tour guide with very strong opinions about the itinerary, pulling her past portraits and doorways, and at least 4 guards who had clearly learned not to interfere when Pip was in motion. "This is my room," Pip said, pushing open a heavy door. "And this," she swept her arm at a shelf running the entire length of one wall, "is my collection. Rocks. Dozens of them. Arranged by color, by size, and apparently by criteria only Pip fully understood." "How many?" Sera asked. 43. Pip pulled one from the middle shelf and held it up. "This one is a potato." Sera looked at it. It was, unmistakably, a potato. Somewhat shriveled. Clearly not a rock. "Why is it in the collection?" "It looked important when I found it." "I don't take things back once they're in." Sera looked at this child, this strange, serious, freckled child who had thrown a rock at a stranger and brought her home like she had always belonged there, and felt something push hard against the locked place in her chest. She turned away before the feeling could settle. Selim found her that evening on the east balcony. He stood beside her without speaking. They both looked at Halvern below, coal fires, cold rooftops, the town she had been invisible in for 3 years. She hasn't stopped talking about you, he said finally. She doesn't stop talking, Sera said. About anything. Almost a smile. Almost. Then gone. I need to ask you something, he said. And I need the truth. Sera turned to look at him properly. Up close, he was younger than he seemed and far more tired. The kind of tired that did not lift with sleep. 8 years ago, he said. Were you in Drayton? She went still. A muscle in her cheek pulled tight. Yes, she said. And? She turned back to the dark. Her voice was quiet and smooth the way a stone is smooth after years of water. I was 20. No family, no money, no papers. I had a baby in a midwife's house at the edge of the city. They told me she was stillborn. I left the next morning. I have been leaving places ever since. She was not stillborn, Selim said. Sera's hands tightened on the railing. You don't know that. I know my late queen died 3 weeks after Pip was born. I know Pip was brought to the Citadel by my chief advisor, Lord Aldrich, and presented as the queen's child. I know I never questioned it because I was drowning and Aldrich told me what I needed to hear. He paused. I am done not asking questions. Sera stared at him. If you're right, she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. Just once, then someone stole 8 years. Yes, he said. Someone did. The midwife's house was 2 hours outside Halvern, up a road that turned to mud after the first mile. When Mara answered the door, she looked at Sera's face and did not ask who they were or why they had come. She had known this day was coming. She had simply been counting down. Inside, with a low fire and 3 cups of tea no one touched, she told them everything. Aldrich had come to her 2 days before the birth. He had not threatened her. He had offered her money and framed it as kindness. The baby would go to a good woman, Lady Venna, a woman who had means and warmth and no children of her own. The mother was nobody. No papers. No wolf. No future to offer a child. He said it was better this way, Mara said. Her hands were folded on the table. I have told myself that every day for 8 years. Sera was very still. Was she healthy, she said. Her voice was the smallest thing in the room. When they took her. Was she healthy? Mara looked up. Her eyes were wet. She was perfect. She cried the whole way out. Loud as anything. Sera nodded once. She stood, walked to the window, and looked at the mud road and the bare trees and breathed very carefully. She did not make a sound. But her shoulders were shaking. Selim waited. He did not try to touch her or fill the silence. He let her have it. That was the right thing to do, and somehow he knew it. When she turned back, her face was steady. Aldrich, she said. I want to know everything about him. Selim confronted him that night. Sera stood in the corridor and listened through the door. I did what was necessary, she heard Aldrich say. You decided, Selim said, without me, about my daughter. You were not capable of deciding. You were drowning. The court needed. She had a mother. She had a drifter with no papers, no wolf, and no future. I gave her a life. A long silence. When Selim spoke again, his voice was so quiet Sera could barely hear it through the door. Get out of this citadel. Tonight. If I see you in any territory I hold, it will go very badly for you. The door opened. Aldrich walked out and looked directly at Sera. His expression was not apologetic. It was the expression of a man who had made a calculation and still believed the arithmetic was sound. You are going to ruin everything he has built, he said. Then it wasn't built well, she said. He left. And 1 hour later, so did Pip. The guard found the empty bed, the open window, the single rock left on the sill like a message. He brought the news to Selim with the face of a man who knows what he is about to break. He took her, Selim said. I know. Sera was already moving. The Gorge Road. It's the only way out of Halvern that avoids the main gates. How do you know that? Because I used it, she said, every time I needed to disappear. They ran. And somewhere between the citadel steps and the edge of the outer woods, the wolf that had been silent inside Sera for 8 years came back. Not slowly. Not with warning. One breath, she was a woman running through the dark, and the next breath, she was something older and faster and entirely certain. The night opened up around her in ways she had forgotten. Selim shifted beside her without breaking stride. They ran. The old stone bridge over the Halvern Gorge was narrow and iced over and maybe 100 years past its best. Aldrich stood at its center with Pip held by the wrist. A lantern. A horse waiting at the far side. Pip was not crying. She was furious. You are being extremely rude, she informed him, and my father is going to be very upset. Quiet, Aldrich said. I will not be quiet. I have a rock in my jacket pocket and I am considering my options. Selim stepped onto the bridge. Then Sera. Aldrich looked between them and his grip on Pip tightened. Stay back. Both of you. I leave. The girl comes with me until I am clear. Then I release her. That is the arrangement. There is no arrangement, Selim said. There is if you want her back. Sera stepped forward. Aldrich looked at her. He had planned for the king. Kings followed protocol, measured risk, calculated. He had not planned for a mother who had already lost this child once and had decided somewhere in the dark of the woods that she would not survive losing her twice. Don't, he said. She shifted. The fight was not graceful. It was fast and absolute, and when it was over, Aldrich was on the cold stone of the bridge, and Sera was standing over him, breathing hard, with eyes that had not gone all the way back to human. Selim had Pip. Her arms were around his neck. She was shaking slightly, though she would later deny this with spectacular conviction. Sera looked down at Aldrich for one long moment. Go, she said. Far. And don't come back. He went. The blood test results came 3 days later. The court physician read them aloud in Selim's study in the careful voice of someone delivering news they do not fully understand the weight of. Selim set the paper down and looked at Sera. You already knew, he said. I already knew, she agreed. What do you want? She thought about it carefully. I want Pip to know. I want Lady Venna treated with respect. She raised her. She loves her, and that matters. I want it to be Pip's choice how much I am in her life. And for yourself? She looked at him. At this tired, careful man who was asking the right question 8 years too late, but was asking it now, looking at her like the answer actually mattered. I want to stop leaving, she said. He held her gaze. Then stop. They told Pip together, sitting on the floor of her room with the rock collection between them. Pip listened to all of it without interrupting, which was so unusual that Sera understood she was taking it seriously. When they finished, Pip was quiet for a moment. So Venna is still my mum, she said. Yes, Sera said immediately. Always. And you're also my mum, if you want that. Pip considered this with the gravity of someone running important numbers. I want that. That means I have 2 mums and most people only have 1. I think I'm ahead. Selim made a sound that was almost a laugh. Sera pressed her hand over her mouth. Pip reached over and straightened a rock on the shelf. Then, entirely casually, without looking up. If we have a baby, can we also get a dog? I already have a name. Sera looked at Selim. Selim looked at Sera. What's the name? He said. Gerald II, Pip said. Neither of them asked about Gerald I. Outside, Halvern was still gray and cold and full of coal smoke. But in a room with 43 rocks and 1 potato and a 6-year-old who had changed everything by throwing a small stone at a stranger in a market, it was, for the first time in 8 years, warm. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. Subscribe for a brand new story every week. Like if Pip had you smiling, and comment below, Team Sera, Team Selim, or Team Gerald II?